7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome to the HenryHussey Coaching YouTube channel and podcast, where we discuss everything physique and lifestyle related, as well as the science of getting jacked. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the next installment of the Chat with Coach on HenryHussey Coaching. I was actually going to get Pascal to introduce it because he's so good at it, but I totally forgot. I might leave him for the introduction later. For those of you who don't know these two gentlemen, they're two people that I very, very much look up to in the coaching industry. First, we have Steve Hall. Steve Hall is the owner of Revive Stronger. He puts out some fantastic online content. Some names that he's just been working with recently are Broderick Chavez. We also have like Mike Isertel, Cliff Wilson, just to name a few. And then we also have the beast from Berlin, Pascal himself. This gentleman comes from a fantastic powerlifting background, and now he has been working towards a bodybuilding show. The reason we started this call today is because we're all going to be into prep. This is my last week of a deload before I start my show prep this weekend on the 22nd. Love starting show prep on a Saturday. It's just great. And Steve is in the midst of it, and so is Pascal. So without further ado, gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having us on. I should have let Pascal go first because he was meant to introduce the show anyway.
Yeah, but I'm a little bit shattered because I had my second training session already right before this interview here. And yeah, just grabbed something to eat, like being anabolic, right? We don't want to lose all the gains. So made sure to get some chicken breast in. And I hope that the carbs slowly get into my system so that I'm a little bit more fresher. So go ahead, Steve. Tell the audience a little bit about us.
Thank you so much for having us on the show, and kind of to hear that there are other coaches who obviously know their stuff like yourself, look up to us as coaches. Like, that means the world to us because we do put a lot of time and effort into not just producing online content. It's obviously a lot of what we do, but obviously researching the best methods, interviewing experts, kind of trying to get all that best information and then relaying it in as kind of layman terms as we can. And very excited to talk about bodybuilding prep and all of that good stuff. That's what we live for. So as a general introduction, like me and Pascal came from similar kind of backgrounds. As like, we're quite similar in many ways, but like there's some extreme individual difference with us at the moment, which we'll probably get into. Revive Stronger is all about providing content for bodybuilders, powerlifters, people who want to get into those sort of arenas, physique sports, but also just like general pop who find those areas interesting, want to build maximal muscle. And we've had some really good opportunities to be working with Mike Isertel very closely and Renaissance Periodization, who are fantastic. And we come from a background of like Lyle McDonald, Alan Aragon, Brad Schoenfeld, 3D Muscle Journey. That's really where we take a lot of our kind of knowledge from. And then we've been lucky enough to work with a lot of people online, and that is where we kind of do most of our work, is through online coaching, which is done over the internet, which I guess is
all of our work.
All of our work is done over the internet.
It's a amazing industry that you can actually do that. You know what I mean? Like a lot of work is just done over the internet, and that's, part of technology has allowed people to do that and do so very effectively over long distances. 50 years ago, or even like when the internet first came out, that would not be possible with data collection.
It's funny because right when I went to the second training session of my day here today, I was talking with my mother on the phone, and I haven't seen her for a while, just as a side note here. But I was basically saying that I considered visiting her, and I could actually, travel the whole time. All I need is a kind of decent internet connection, and then I can work from everywhere, basically. And this is absolutely nuts. I mean, when you really think about it, like you've said, a couple of years ago, this wouldn't have been possible, and now it's really the norm, actually, or it's getting closer to being the norm.
Well, I noticed one thing. It's a gentleman, Menno Henselman, as I'm sure you're aware of. He's been in many podcasts, and every time, I swear to God, he's somewhere different. Okay, so without that further ado, I'd love to start with Steve and talk about your show prep. Now, you've been going on for quite some time. You've had a diet break, which to a lot of my listeners that would even consider doing a show prep, that is something crazy and ludicrous. So do you mind just starting from the top and just explaining to me how you would plan out your own show prep and how it's been going and things like that?
Totally. So I guess I should start this with a background of I competed in 2014, so quite a while ago now, and I had a coach for that period of time. Natural bodybuilding was it definitely wasn't as big as it is now. Like, there's so many people doing it now. It's got way more popular, even in those few years that I've now been in the industry. So I had someone I regarded as he was a fine coach for me at the time. He supported me through my prep. But I had a really hard prep. And so that kind of left me in a position this time round to try and make my prep pretty much as easy as possible. So to make the transition of dieting as comfortable as possible, because dieting is not fun. The body does not want to release body fat stores. You adapt harder and harder the longer you go. So the way I've actually kind of periodized every little detail really has been quite precise. And I was actually been talking to Pascal about how I really want to do like a very in-depth blog post about every single minute detail, because there's so many little factors that have happened that kind of you don't take into consideration, and I might forget to just talk about, and I'd need to put up pen to paper because there are lots of intricacies within it. Mm-hmm. But as a broad base, basically, it sounds like I've been doing prep for a long time, but in reality it's kind of been 3 weeks really, which sounds ludicrous, and it does sound really ludicrous, because I started my prep, I guess, really like the first half of prep at about 180 pounds, and my stage weight was 165 pounds in 2014, so only 15 pounds over stage weight, so not like a huge crazy amount. I dieted then for only 2 months basically, lost about 5 pounds, and then at that point I was like, actually I've still got months upon months until my show. I was pretty damn lean, like probably just under 10% body fat. Took a period of 10 weeks away from dieting. So I actually masked for 5 weeks and then maintained for the additional 5 weeks. And yeah, it's weird because I masked and maintained, but my body weight actually the entire time stayed the same. And body weight, as your listeners probably know, is a really kind of strange thing. It fluctuates up and down. It's not always a very good indicator of what's really going on. And me and Pascal on our podcast on In Revive to Stage have talked about that a great deal, and how you have to take into account so many different things. So anyway, to set the scene, I did that. I then have been for the last 3 weeks dieting, which is like the second half of prep, I guess you could call it, starting again at 170 pounds. So really only about 5 pounds above, 5 pounds above stage weight, which is like glycogen filled peaked stage weight. So my lowest weigh-in was 160 in 2014, but I think already at this stage I've matched or beaten the conditioning that I achieved in 2014 in 3 weeks kind of, which is again ludicrous really, because in 2014 I dieted for over 30 weeks to stage, and I was completely wrecked. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So right now, 3 weeks into my prep, feeling pretty good. Like, I'm not going to lie, there's been, me and Pascal have been talking about it recently. My scale weight hasn't kind of come down in a predictable fashion. But when you are this lean, there's such a small amount of scale weight change that's actually your body fat that could be changing. And there's so many other things like water weight that could be manipulated, that could be impacting that you really have to be as objective as you can, look at your physique, look at what's happening. So right now it's kind of exciting, but also nerve-wracking and a bit gut-wrenching, because it's like I've talked about this dynamic quite a lot, and especially in bodybuilding, there's an element of bodybuilders just love to work hard, but working hard isn't always the best option, and sometimes like working smart. And I feel like my prep for the most part has been like a smart prep, and following the process has been what's carried me through. And right now there's temptations to work hard, like making my cardio higher, cutting calories, but I'm sticking to the process, following things through, and hoping that when I come to stage, I'm going to look dramatically different and feel dramatically different to back in 2014. So yeah, in kind of roundabout way, I'm now just coming towards 6 weeks out. This might come out a bit later, so I might be closer to stage, but for my kind of practice show, and then I've got my main show about 4 weeks after that one, which I'm super excited for. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of how things have gone so far.
No, fantastic. It's quite the list there, and that's a big thing that I was discussing with you before we went on the air earlier, that, preparation is a very large part, and I mentioned that I spent 8 weeks this is 2 mesos after I had kind of a marination phase, as we say, and yeah, basically I did that 8-week mini cut, and in that period of time I lost quite an amount of weight. I then maintained now, I've been maintaining I've been bouncing up and forth between 184, 185, and like you said, that's a lot of things between water, etc., but, I'm leaner right now than I was 6 weeks out at my last show. So that puts me in a very, very advantageous position to, have a nice and easy prep. In fact, I have a diet break that I've put in there about the 8-week out position, and I'm pretty excited about that as well. It should be interesting to see how that adaptation, helps me out. And I remember in your episode with Roderick Chavez, when he was discussing, the lion in the savannah, and dieting for so long if they starve the next day. I actually loved that analogy. It was fantastic. And I'm curious to see how my body reacts to it, because I'm one of the people that I'm not huge on refeeds. I don't really enjoy them. They don't do anything mentally for me. I'm very blessed because I can sit down and eat bland food 24/7, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever. Ironically, I love food. It's one of my passions in life. I work in the restaurant industry as well, at one of the best restaurants in Canada, and it's just it's so hot and cold for me. I still like a light switch I can turn off, which for a lot of people, they aren't that lucky. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see how my plan goes throughout.
What's your estimated stage rate?
I'm hoping between 168 to 170. Last year, at the bottom of depletion, I was 172. I worked my ass off, to be quite honest, this off season with a lot of the MRV concepts. I put off a really, really good off season, and to be honest, I made some good newbie gains this year still. So I got up, to a really good weight. My strength increased a lot just using that scientific-based, really intelligent training. Years before my off-season, I didn't take very seriously. I'd eat and I'd train, but nothing to this point. I took off-season seriously this year than I took my show prep the previous 2 years. So I took it very seriously, and I made some fantastic progress. So I'm hoping that I will be, because the first 2 years, I feel like I wasn't lean enough, as I mentioned. I had some water gain in my back when I did the front load and all this other stuff, but yeah, I'm really hoping to get that really nice and dialed in look for men's physique, and I think I'm going to have to lose my previous stage weight plus muscle gained. There might be, like I said, I'll get around 170 again, I think. So that puts me at about a pound a week for 16, so that's an all right deficit. My maintenance calories right now is 3,200 calories, so you take 600-ish off that, I'm in a pretty good place to start with no cardio. In fact, I'm in the Cliff Wilson camp of that. Cliff does not like cardio. He'd rather take things out with diet. I feel like I'm the same camp with that as well, especially now with my issue that I've been mentioning I've been having with my knees with the tendonitis. That, minimal amounts of cardio, and if I need it at the end, I'll have it there as a tool in my toolkit to enhance in there. So then I won't be adapted to the cardio as well, and it'll be extremely effective, right?
Exactly.
Those adaptations over time really take a kilter.
Totally. I think we've just talked about it in the last episode of Revive to Stage, that even when it's only LIS, the body makes some adaptations. Perhaps no adaptations that interfere with your resistance training, but it still makes some adaptations. And I mean, you get more efficient at it, and it's not really what you want. Actually, you want to be as inefficient as possible, so that you are actually losing weight when you are in a smaller deficit, right? I mean,
100%. And I could notice even like the way I started my mini cut was, I started at 20 minutes of cardio and then I slowly ramped over time and we finished off at about 45 minutes daily. And, last going off, I was doing 45 minutes like it was nothing. Like I didn't even, I just put on like some music or a podcast or something. And by the end of it, I was just like, I wasn't even sweating. And that was the last of it. So how hard is your body actually working if you're not breaking a sweat doing 45 minutes of incline walking after a while, right? And that's a big part, I think, about what makes high-intensity interval training so good, because that never gets easier.
It just always sucks. But I see that so many people also do it wrong when it comes to high interval training. The thing is, though, that I never prescribe it as a cardio tool. Only for the people who are actually doing it for supplementing their sport. For example, when there are fighters or more into CrossFit or anything like that, but never actually for a bodybuilding show, unless they really want to do it. But then you need to make sure that it doesn't interfere with your resistance training. 100%. Because those really do have the same adaptations or the same pathways in your body, which then could interfere with your performance.
100%. Well, I can imagine your maximum recoverable volume of legs would come down, especially if you're doing like really intensive interval training for 10, 15 minutes. I mean, when I was doing it my first year and second year, I would actually have crazy calf and leg pumps, like the vascularity would come out, and I'd actually be crippled for a little bit, just like hobbling back to the showers, drenched. And yeah, I can imagine that the next day you come in, your recovery is not going to be enough to push it not only with intensity, but also to the amount of volume you would need to progress. And I mean, as we know, even in prep, that's the name of the game when it comes to, intensity and then volume. That equates muscle retention. And that's so important. And I try to preach that to all of my clients, you need to get that volume in. We need to equate that weekly and bring it up over time, because you want to retain that muscle. If you work so hard all year to gain a couple pounds at a certain point, and then all of a sudden you diet down and you're not doing this correctly and you lose a lot of mass, it's kind of like spinning your wheels to a certain effect. And that's why it's very important to do it intelligently.
Yeah. And it's funny because so many people focus on only protein then. In terms of their protein intake, like I need to hit that minimum amount because of muscle retention. But the main stimulus for muscle retention is, as you mentioned, the resistance training. Yeah. And I mean, I already did it with some clients that I actually pulled down or lowered the proteins to make sure that they get some more carbs in, so that their workouts are being fueled properly, so that they can push it in the end even harder at the gym. And this causes their muscle to be retained or even gained along the way. It's not really only the protein. Of course, it has an effect, definitely. But the main driver is the resistance training itself. And you need to make sure that this stays on top.
100%. In fact, that's something that I've been working with a gentleman now since December. His plan was he wants to do the show as well at the same date that I'm doing, but he was about 55 pounds when he started with me, so he had quite a bit of weight to lose. He's down 45 pounds now since December. He's made some really good losses. Shit. Yeah, he's been doing very well with it. I train with him almost daily. Like, he's my guy that I go in with almost every day.
Nice.
And we take care of things. But he basically did he ended off the last bit of his cut before he did like basically a little break from dieting for a little bit before we start show prep. At this point, I mean, he was just basically digging for a couple of weeks to lose that little bit extra weight. So what I did was exactly that. I took him to that idea of 0.82 grams of protein per pound, and then basically just added all the difference of that, and it was 50 extra grams of carbohydrates, and he noticed a very large increase in energy, especially with that last week or so. And people always wonder, like, you're adding carbs and taking out protein, and they get this very like, what are you doing? Like, I'm dieting, I need this protein, we need to preserve muscle. And I said, I'd rather you have that energy to fuel your workouts, especially in the post and pre-workout window. That's exactly where you need it. That's where you need it. And that's, going to help preserve muscle with the volume, but you're also going to be having more energy and things like that. It just works all around. But people get so worried when They hear you're taking away their precious protein.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in a
It's
deficit,
hard.
and so many people think like, what? My protein, I need that to retain all my muscle mass, which isn't really the case. I mean, yes, there's a lower threshold, but I mean, it is lower than most people think, especially in the bro realms, I think.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And like I said, he's right now he's sitting at 210 pounds. And, say, he put to 0.82, that was 158, 160. So that's a lot of extra carbohydrates you can work with. And I'll take it. In fact, that's how I'll be starting my prep at the camp of the 0.82 grams. And then I'll basically bring up protein over time because just for the feeling satiated and things like that, I find that the higher amounts of proteins will really help with that. Whereas, white rice gets in and out.
Yeah.
For sure. So, Pascal, you were doing some prepping as well. Yours was not going as smoothly, though. I've been watching the Revive to Stage. In fact, anyone who's watching this right now, I implore you, over the next while, go watch the Revive to Stage. It is a great little podcast, basically mini-series, documenting these gentlemen and what they've been going through, and it's very informative and a very good way to show like two very different ways of how things can go. So Pascal, why don't you tell us a little about what you've been doing?
Totally. I mean, I try to sum it up as quickly as I can because there's actually a lot to talk about when it comes to that, and to understand, and to understand why my contest prep didn't go as planned and had some real struggles along the way and all that kind of stuff. But basically, I wanted to prep for 29 weeks. Wanted to do the same show as Steve, and I started back in March working together with Jeff Alberts from Team 3DMJ. We started the contest prep with in mind not having a fixed show date. So we were kind of flexible about it because my background was that last year I was dieting for my for a powerlifting meet. I started the diet right around in March to June, did some mini cutting, then I had a small break, and then I started a prolonged cut because I wanted to do a powerlifting meet in October last year, I think. Mm-hmm. Then I always had some issues with my left hip. And it turned out that I had a severe cartilage damage, a torn labrum, FAI, so it's basically bone deformity, which then caused the cartilage damage. And my hip was always so inflamed from the high volume training I needed to do to actually compete and do some progress that I needed to drop out or cancel that preparation for the meet. So it was basically the time where I was already dieting for my weight class. And I thought, okay, now I'm undergoing a surgery in December, which also happened in December last year. And I wanted to lose as much weight as possible so that when I'm walking on crutches, that it's a little bit more of a relief than a pain in the ass to actually walk around. And in the end, looking back in hindsight, I'm actually glad that I lost that amount of weight because I went down from 90 kilograms to 78 kilograms over the course over the time span from March 2016, right around March 2016 to December 2016. Then after my surgery, I was, of course, recovering, walking on crutches for 2 months, ate at an isocaloric state, so just around maintenance. But I was already hitting the gym right after I went out of the hospital. So only, we call it the disco pumper, only upper body. So did a push-pull 4 times a week. And then, at the moment where I could lay off my crutches, I then decided to do the contest prep or start my contest prep. Now, moving fast forward, now is the time where my hip, 7 months after the surgery, gave up on me again. Unfortunately, I perhaps pushed it a little bit too hard, and I needed to push it a little bit harder because I gave myself enough time. I think with 29 weeks for a contest prep, this is sufficient amount of time to actually get on stage. Also because I was right around 20 to 25 pounds above stage weight for my estimated stage weight. So enough time actually. But along the way, I experienced some struggles. What we are basically always doing is implementing some diet breaks, like every 8th week, some days where some things happen in life on which you can't really then stick to your diet. This is simply the case here. So we always make sure that there are some options along the way, and that there is or are some weeks in which we can't really be in that deficit for the contest prep itself. This is also important to know for your audience, perhaps, that if when you're planning your contest prep, always plan with a lot of weeks which won't go as planned, so that you don't run into issues the closer you get to the show, right? So plenty of time, but right in the beginning, I didn't really lose as fast as I could. But this is only something I realized right in the midst of my contest prep. Like, I was losing close to 0.5% a week, which is really on the lower end, especially when you're coming from a maintenance caloric intake. You are not really dieted, fatigued, and you are highly motivated. I think you can then push it a little bit harder, especially in the first weeks, then reduce the deficit the closer you're getting to the show. And then, right after 12 weeks of dieting, everything went well and smoothly. I all of a sudden hit a wall. Weirdly enough, I mean, I didn't lose any weight anymore. We've made some adjustments already, did implement some cardio, like 2 times a week, 400 calories of cardio. We decreased my calories to right about 275 grams of carbs, 200 grams of protein, and 50 grams of fat. And simply nothing worked anymore. And this kept going for a couple of weeks, actually. We've always made some adjustments, implemented a little bit more cardio, increased my NEAT as well, and nothing seemed to happen. And I was stuck at around the 78 kilogram mark, and even diet breaks didn't help anymore to actually accelerate the fat loss again. So what I basically did, like 4 or 5 weeks ago, was that I was getting close on time, and I really needed to push it a little bit harder to make it even possible or realistic to still be able to make it on stage. And I wanted to give it a try. I wanted to see if it's still possible or not. And then slashed my calories like really hard, increased my steps to right about 15,000 steps a day, like as an average. Did 2 times a week cardio, plus additional 2 times a week of cardio, like in an auto-regulation style, where I said, okay, these additional cardio sessions will be a minimum of 200 calories, and then upwards, like how I'm feeling on that day. Yes, the weight loss was coming, but immediately when I pushed it that hard, my hip flared up. Like, it really got inflamed, and I immediately went to see my doctor. We did an MRI, and it turned out that there was a lot of inflammation going on in my hip, and also a lot of fluid, which could be an indicator of my labrum being damaged again. This will only show in the future. I don't really know it yet. So when the pain really consists or persists for the next coming weeks, I need to actually have another consultation. Last week I then had a training session in which I only did leg extensions, and out of a sudden I had an acute and really sharp pain in my hip area, which then was kind of the signal to then pull the plug all along. And I mean, I came from a really stressful time. In the beginning, I didn't even mention that, but in the beginning I was dealing with extreme sleep issues for 8 to 10 weeks, where I didn't sleep through the night, every single night for a couple of weeks, which was really frustrating. Also, I was still working in a company, or my office job back then. I'm going to visit evening school still, I'm doing the SBS Academy, then building my self-employment, and also doing the contest prep. It all accumulated, and it was all a little bit too much. And also keep in mind, I was still recovering from my surgery back from last year, was in such a long dieting state, actually, because 2 months of being in a maintenance state isn't really enough to reverse the negative adaptations from last year's dieting phase. So I basically also had a consultation with Broderick Chavez, and he was saying that my body is already in a state where it feels like as if it's stage ready. It's totally fighting against you. It does everything it can, and all the negative adaptations you are experiencing right now is like as if you're stage lean already. And what you would need to do is reverse diet for the next 6 months to actually be in a healthy state again. And yeah, it all came together, and now putting a coming to an end now. I now decided that it's perhaps not the best time and not the year for me in which I should actually compete.
And I will directly quote here yourself: the stage will always be there.
Absolutely. And this is, but I had a hard time to accept it, actually, because I was so focused and on this goal. I'm such a competitive person. I've always been like that since I've grew up. And for me, it was like, okay, when I set myself a goal, I want to achieve it by all costs. I don't care what happens along the way, because otherwise I would see myself as a failure. And it really annoys me that something like this, in terms of my health, needed to happen, that I pull the plug. Because Steve and I talked about it in the past. I want also to be a role model, and we are working as coaches, and I want to practice what I preach, actually, and not just in terms of stepping on stage, but also in terms of your health and making decisions and stuff like that. And so basically I thought that I'm not worth anything anymore when I were to say, okay, this isn't the year I would step on stage. But then I took one step backwards and put my coaching hat on, as Steve was always telling me. Put your coaching hat on and look at yourself as if you were your own client. What would you do? And at that moment, I would just realize, okay, this is really not the perfect time to step on stage. The stage will be there in 6 months from now, in 1 year from now, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. Focus on the here and now, what you can do. And there were so many people along the way who told me, you're not in a good spot to actually do a contest prep. And I'm not talking about my environment like family, but competitors itself. Like Eric Helms told me at the conference, like he underwent a FAI surgery as well, and he basically said, man, take your time, there's no rush, actually. And then funny enough, I've seen or met a friend of mine on the street. She's a highly competitive not bikini bodybuilding athlete herself, competed at the Arnold's in the Masters class, took second place there. And she was just like saying immediately, Pascal, you're not in the best spot. I've been there, and believe me, you don't want to go through this. And so basically now I'm in my off season and I can fully concentrate on supporting Steve and gaining some mass, actually.
Yeah, take your time, gain that mass up nice and slowly, and look forward to that. You know, the gains are the good fun parts.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And you know, the importance of being in a good position. Like we've stated this time and time again, when you start is very important. But you know, like you said, that is a very good call that you made, because we had this little conversation before the on air, as I mentioned. Like, I watch your guys' stuff and I see it every day. And I'm older. I'm going to be 34 years this old. I'm not as impressionable as somebody that would say be just out of high school or something that might look up to you, like you said, like a role model. And if you made the incorrect decision, I'm going to do this because I seen Pascal and he had an injury, but he worked through it. And that could be very disadvantageous for him if this person, could permanently hurt themselves. So,
Absolutely.
good call, Bess.
Man, you name it, and this sport is about longevity. And Steve, it's funny because Steve also said to me so often, man, you're probably not in the best sport, and take your health more for granted. And really take care of yourself. And it's not like when you want, of course, bodybuilding prep is not always fun. There will be times in which you will feel miserable, will feel hungry, everything sucks and all that kind of stuff. But this shouldn't come at a cost of your not reversible health consequences. Like, going through a bodybuilding prep isn't healthy for your body as well. But, I mean, you can still quit and you can reverse out of it. But in terms of my hip, I mean, yes, you need to grind sometimes, but at this time, it simply wasn't the right decision to grind. And I did it, and I regret it, actually, that I took it so far that my hip flared up and perhaps set me back again in terms of my recovery.
Yeah, no, that's a great position, and I think it's important as coaches to, really, that's almost your number one thing, to take care of your clients, and that's health as well. I have a female athlete that I'm working with. She came to me at 20 weeks out. And she said, can we do a prep? She's like, I think I'd like to do 16. And I said, well, to be honest, if you want to do 16, I'd rather do 20, because I'd like to learn how your body works, how you adapt, your volume training, intensities that you're working with, etc., and all this other stuff. And, I said, we'll start you off at a very minute deficit. I'm going to see how your body adapts. And at this point, she was at 1,500 calories, and I was expecting her to lose a certain amount of weight. In fact, over the period of a month, she never lost any weight. And she was dead set on doing this show, and the same one that I'm doing. And at the end of 4 weeks, I said, I'm very uncomfortable coaching you for this show. I said, it's something that you would be in show prep hell by the time 16 weeks comes around. And, it's unethical for me to do so. And I think I personally know at least a half dozen coaches that probably would have been like, yeah, sure, we're just going to slash your calories and let's do it. It's all about the grind. It's all about the, add in that extra cardio and do whatever it takes attitude. But for me personally, when it comes down to someone's health and, that might scare her away from ever competing again. This will be her third show. And instead, what I suggested we do was take an extra 6 months. There'll be a secondary show in May. And I said, let's reverse you out and perhaps, take some time and do things properly. And I said, it might not be 20 weeks. In fact, I'm going to be monitoring things for almost a full year again. But you're going to have a much easier prep starting at 2,300 calorie maintenance than 1,500. And it's all about the health. You need to be healthy, and, if you have any issues, you can't afford to hurt people or yourself when it comes down to it.
I think Steve has a good one to share on this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's quite a few things. The whole time Pascal was talking, I want to reiterate how stubborn he really was. Like, he really, really wanted to compete. And I was completely honest with him. Like, he would agree with me that I said, I was like, Pascal, I've been avoiding trying to say this to you because I know how much it means to you to compete. But from me to you, you need to pull out. And I said this to him, he still pushed for another 2 weeks. And I said, I'll support you in whatever decision you make, but mate, you need to pull out, because this is gonna, you're gonna get to a point where something's gonna stop you rather than you choosing to stop. And something I always talk about is make a cost benefit kind of analysis, be rational. What's the rational decision right now? And for Pascal, it was obvious right there and then, but humans aren't rational. We don't like being rational, and we're very short term in mindset for a lot of the time. So I think me and Pascal both, and you, Henry, as a coach, we often actually just hold clients back. Like a lot of the time, like we'd be losing weight and they'd be like, oh, the scale didn't come down as much as I wanted it to. And I'm like, hold off. Like, we don't want to push harder than we need to. And it's always like, same with training. They're like, oh, this week was easy. Let's push really hard next week. And I'm like, no, we're just tinker things. And yeah, it's just not worth it, especially in such a sport like bodybuilding. It is an extreme sport, or any of the physique sports. Like, if you fall out of love with it, it's just like you're not going to ever want to do it again, and like you'll lose your passion for it. And it's just like, I love analogies, as you probably know. I was trying to think of a good analogy for this, and I was like, well, it's kind of like maybe there's a big special event like a wedding, and you need to make a wedding cake for it. So someone's asked you to do it and produce it in a week. Are you going to produce a good cake after a week of just trying to like come up with this cake? Or would it be better if you said, no, actually, I can't do this, and you take on a job that's months down the line, and then you can put lots of time, effort, practice into it. You can research what kind of sponge makes the best like tasting sponge, and like you can look up different design methods. You can make a really unique cake, and then other people are going to see this cake and they're going to be like, I want to employ you to make my cake. And then you're going to have much more fun. You're going to get much more kind of reward and benefit from that, rather than rushing to try and make it in a short period of time where you're probably going to have a shitty result. So yeah, I just think it's so contrasting between me and Pascal, because we have literally had like the exact opposite kind of sort of prepped in some ways. And I don't think that's any fault of Pascal's at all, because everything he, like from the outset, he tried to do everything as best as possible. And it just goes to show, I think, how you have to try really hard to keep your body healthy to lose fat. And it's not an easy process. There's a real like push and pull relationship between that. Just like negotiating protein and carb intake, like there's little minute details that come into prep that you really have to consider. It's like, well, and I remember talking to Pascal, I was like, would having a diet break now actually propel you forward more than just taking another week at dieting? Because it's not like, okay, you take away a week of dieting, you've lost a whole week, but has that week gained you extra weeks of dieting? It's a balancing act, and it's really hard to know. Yeah, the experience with Pascal, I think I'm so glad that we've recorded the weekly episodes, because to capture that has been really, really interesting. And for me and for Pascal, I think there were times at which it got emotional, because it really was hard. And seeing Pascal go through the struggles, it brought back memories of my struggles and how I didn't want him to have to go through that. So yeah, it's super interesting. And I hope that any listeners coming away from this will be able to take that, like, to have a long-term mindset, think about health.
Yeah, and I would like to add something on that, because as you mentioned, think about health. And I think that the contest prep already starts before the contest prep starts. So it sounds 100%. Confusing, but what I mean by that is when your sleep isn't on point, you can't really expect it to become better throughout a contest prep. When you are already diet fatigued or training fatigued, you can't really expect it to be better during a contest prep. When your life is stressful already, same applies there as well. And I think that you want to put yourself in the best possible state before starting a contest prep. And this was I think the major takeaway from me for this one. I was too stubborn to accept that perhaps now is not the time, but I thought, this is probably not as severe, right? This won't take so much of an impact on my contest prep, but it did. It really did. It made things so much harder, especially the start where I didn't really sleep well. Perhaps this was also the cause why I didn't lose as effectively in the beginning and all that kind of stuff. So basically, for the audience and for everyone who's always considering doing a contest prep, try to prepare yourself for the contest prep. And yeah, the off season is the preparation, right?
Yeah, and I started talking a lot in my Facebook. I do the live videos and things like that, and I started talking to people over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. And I'm like, I've stopped dieting. This is what I'm doing. I'm maintaining. I'm not massing. I'm basically having a prep. I'm getting all my fatigue down. I'm just getting ready, and starting next week, or the end of this week, I should say, I'm excited to diet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm actually like, all right, I can't wait. And you need that excitement to start off, because I guarantee by 10 weeks in, I'm not going to feel the same way.
Totally.
But if I don't feel that way right now, 10 weeks in would be an even considerably worse story, right? And yeah, like you said, you got to have a mindset, not only with positivity of going into it, but you also got to be ready physically. You know, as you mentioned, I actually have insomnia that I've been battling for 10, 12 years. And my sleep has actually improved in the last while. But during the last month of prep, I'm only getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. It's bad. and then like my job besides this, I work 10-hour days. I'm up early in the morning. I do my training, etc. So there's a whole lot going on, and then that's why I think it was what I did in the last couple of years that made it so bad at the end of prep was I was always playing catch up, slash your calories so low, and do so much cardio, and I was just making my body extremely stressed. When if I can take that stress instead of going like this, and I can go like this, then it's going to be a lot easier. And as it's been mentioned before, Steve, in your Revive to Stronger, Revive to Straight stage, that it affects relationships and things like that too. And me not being able to sleep a full night's sleep with my significant other, if I'm sleeping with her in the bed and I'm tossing and turning and I can't sleep, and then I'm up and then I'm moaning around, even things like that put a negative connotation. In fact, like last year when I had my last little bit of prep, I even said to her, I was like, I can't stay over anymore. Like, just because like it's frustrating for me as well, because if I'm home, I can get up because I know I'm not going to sleep. I can turn on the computer. I can do a bit of light reading, whatever. But if I'm at her house at the time, I wasn't able to do that, right?
Yeah.
So it all these little things and stressors, and if it makes it easier on my life around me as well, I think that's very important. In fact, I know, Steve, you talked about that a little bit with your relationship, that this prep has been considerably easier because you all do get a little light fuse and things like that do happen, and that's another very important part for me personally about prep as well, that it makes it easier not only on myself but the people around me.
No, 100%. I mean, it's oh man. Actually, I spoke to Pascal about this, and I was like, it's lucky you're a bachelor and you're on your own, because if you had a relationship on the go as well, that's additional stress. It's also a benefit because you've got them to you can kind of reach out to them. They're going to support you, but it's still a stress because there's still considerations. You have to consider them. You have to maybe do social occasions with them. Example, I've got a wedding I'll be how many weeks out then? 4 or 5 weeks out. And I'm going to a wedding like that. Any competitor would be like, holy shit, that is not cool. Maybe they wouldn't go. But I knew about this ages in advance. I planned for it. It'll be fine. But it almost actually upsets me to say it, because in 2014, I definitely allowed this to affect loads of my relationships. Charlotte, I'm lucky she's still with me, because from the sounds of it, it was awful, god awful. I was just not a nice person to be around. I remember I was a one-to-one PT at the time, and some of my colleagues were like, after prep, they're like, you're a different person. I thought you hated me. And I was like, no, I didn't hate you. I was like, what? I haven't changed. But you don't realize at the time that these little, you just hate people. Everything annoys you. You just want to be with your food, doing your training. You just, that's what you want to be doing. And so, yeah, it kind of upsets me, because when I was first contemplating competing again, Charlotte was actually distressed. She did not want me to compete at all. She was like, whenever I talked about it, she wasn't supportive, she wasn't encouraging. She was just like, I don't want to hear about this. And every time I brought it up, I want someone who's going to be like, oh, cool, you're going to step on stage, I get to come and see you on stage, this is awesome. But she was just thinking, he's going to be a dick, he's going to be pissed off, he's not going to be sleeping right, he's not going to want to cuddle me, it's going to impact our relationship. However, credit to me is about a week ago, she was like, I've hardly noticed you even been prepping. And I did an Instagram post. I was like, I feel like I've already won, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm in better condition than last time. I'm more muscular than last time, and my relationships are well intact. Like, I feel great. Yeah. So the fact that that's happened, I know there'll be times where it tests us, and I think to know that that will happen, and Charlotte knows that now, and I told her before, but it wasn't quite as, it was pretty extreme. It takes its toll, and you just always have to take a step back, think about your actions, think about whether you're being a reasonable human being. But even then, it's still hard to completely know. But yeah, I mean, what we'd been talking about, and like having health planning, taking your off season seriously, something me and Pascal have been really kind of trying to push actually recently with our coaching, is taking on competitors early. So I think Pascal's working with people who are like potentially years out from stage. They know they want to compete, but they're investing.
3 years, for example.
Yeah, exactly. They're investing in it, and I believe that they're going to compete. Like they're the type of person that are going to. And I've got people now who are investing in me early to compete like later down the line. And it's going to be like, they might feel like maybe I don't need this right now, but it's going to pay off, because we'll be able to get an actual annual plan. The longer you can plan it out, not to say there won't be little tweaks, the longer you can plan out, the better. It's totally, it's an emotional sport, surprisingly.
It very, very, very much so is, and I a lot of people fall in love with it very easily, and I have completely, it's, and like you said, it's very important. Like when I finished my show last year in November, it was the 27th, I spent the next 2-3 weeks, as I mentioned in my last episode, I planned out my entire macro cycle for the year. I made multiple little tweaks along the way. One mesocycle I overreached way too quickly, and I had to, but it's so important to have that plan. And to be able to, because your style of training and things like that, and where you're going to, and it's just, I think the whole thing here is it's so important to have a plan with anything, and especially with this, and to go to anyone that you want to do a show. You should probably take that extra couple of months to work with the person, especially if they're a serious coach. A lot of people would be like, oh yeah, 12 weeks, we're fine, run you into the ground. But we've had the ongoing thing here of health, personal relationships, and just being prepared. And I think that's such a big part that a lot of people neglect, and they really shouldn't. And it's totally super important. Actually, I was going to mention a minute ago when we were talking about the relationships thing. I remember I mentioned to my girlfriend about a month or so ago, I was like, coming up soon, I'm going to start diet. I'm not going to be able to, have a glass of wine and things like that often with you post. And it actually cut into me at the time. She was like, oh, so does that mean like the month out, you're not going to be able to like stay over anymore? Or like what's going to happen there? And it actually hit me then. I was like, she remembered this from 8 months prior, and obviously it had a toll on her. I'm very lucky because she's very supportive, and that's one of the goals, I don't want that to happen again this year, so plan to make it easier, which is very important to me, and I think to her as well.
Definitely. I think, little things like Charlotte's recently, talking of wedding cakes, this is probably why it came up. She's actually making the cake for the wedding that's coming up in a weekend's time, and she's been making, and she's like, she really wants to ask me to try it, because she's like, I can't eat all this cake. Like, she's making entire cakes, and it's all just going to go to waste because she knows I won't. It's little things that you don't think about that crop up along the way. It's kind of like, just as a first-time competitor or someone who's thinking about competing, if you've not enjoyed it, there are ways of doing it and enjoying it, especially like me and Pascal, again, we work with like a lot of bikini athletes seem to get this massively, where they like do 8-12-week preps, and their coach online trashes them into the ground, gives them horrendous amounts of cardio and stuff. And like me and Pascal are both in agreement, bikini preps should not be extreme. Like, they don't need to be extreme, because you're not going to crazy levels of body fat. You're going lean, but you need to be in a healthy place. You can actually enjoy the entire prep. You're going to be on stage. It's all about kind of persona, character. Like, if you're on stage and you're drained and you're pissed off because you're like, then it's no good. You want to be like full of energy and high spirits. So that's the type of coach you want to seek out. Someone who's going to make you love the sport, love the prep, and all those good things. And I think luckily, at least this experience Pascal's had hasn't turned him off the sport. If anything, it's kind of made you more interested and more eager, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I already came up with an annual plan for next year as well. I planned everything out, and it's the same as you've mentioned, Henry, that of course there will be some minor tweaks along the way, but my plan is already structured for next year. Only to take Steve as a role model, because I think that his prep was really like that people should take a look at Steve's prep and how to do it and how to plan it, because he actually started in February and March to do his prep. And then along the way, he realized, okay, I'm already really lean and I could throw in that marination phase, a small gaining phase. But he started at the same time as I, with only like 10 pounds above stage weight or something like that. And the past 2 years, he prepared himself for that moment now. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is so important. And people when they want to take a close look at a contest prep, how it should be run, then go over to Revive to Stage and watch Steve's contest prep, because it is really good. And I mean, I was yesterday talking to him and saying, you can't really tell anyone about your contest prep that you're already 7 weeks out from a show, because all the other bodybuilders would hate you for it. Because
100% they will hate you for it.
Totally, because I mean, look at him. Nothing to complain. I know that the libido is still functioning, which is also a rare case, and he's not struggling right now. I mean, you see so many bodybuilders 12 weeks out from a show already in that horrible state. Like, how on earth shall I survive the next 12 weeks? Come on, this is your fault, actually.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Well, not only their fault, but their fault of their coaches as well for.
Totally, and I think that when it's your own fault, then don't complain about it. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. I mean, sure, perhaps you're kind of suffering or something, yeah, but is it really suffering? Is it really the worst thing that can happen? I think that this grind, or the people that talk about, bodybuilding prep is so hard, it needs to be a hustle or something. Come on, I mean, for real, there are so much more worse things in life, and you are doing it because you want to step on stage and because you're enjoying the process. Mm-hmm. And if you don't enjoy the process and you feel like shit all the time and you're suffering, why are you doing it in the first place? And also, next time, plan ahead and do a better job in planning ahead. Right?
I feel the same way. You know, bodybuilding is a sport. And within any sport, there are athletes. And, you know, being an athlete in any sport is not easy to an extent. You know, just talent gets you somewhere, but hard work will put you the rest of the way forward. So if you want to be an athlete and, you know, compete in a bodybuilding show, you need to adopt that mentality. You know, it's not going to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it, and everyone would be the best. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like people that you just have to put the mindset that it's going to be hard work. And, you know, being an athlete is something that should be strived for. And, you know, the mindset of a champion, you know, it's going to have its pitfalls and hard, but I don't think people that have the right mindset would be complaining about it all the time. No. That just puts a very negative thought in your head as well. If you just talk negatively about it and that's all you surround yourself with, it's just going to make it harder as well in the long run.
Totally.
I think it's quite upset. I think me and Pascal are both on the same kind of lines here, and you as well, Henry, and like, it's quite upsetting actually to see like natural bodybuilding's grown, but I still think there's an air of it's like shit. It's like you're going to feel like crap. You're going to have to really, really grind. It's going to be like horrible. And the same like we said about bikini and stuff. And I think for the majority of your prep should be fun. Like not necessarily like fun, but like I've enjoyed my prep. I felt really good. Like everything's been going great. I feel really structured, everything. Like I haven't felt massive brain fog. I've still enjoyed loads of social events. And then there's going to be this little bit at the end where it's going to suck a little bit because your body's not going to want to be there. You're going to have to push through that wall. But for the majority, it should be good. And people have this the wrong way around. They start off good, and then the majority is awful. And I think for the most part, like we've talked about throughout the entire show, they just don't have a plan, and they don't really know what to expect. And at the end of the day, it's up to you as an individual. Like, it is your fault because it's your body, it's your health. You're pushing it to a point where it shouldn't really go ever. So like, be responsible, take responsibility for your actions, and you should probably invest in a coach if you haven't got much of a clue.
Agree completely. Well, gentlemen, this is actually bringing us up on the almost 1 hour mark.
Nice.
It was originally estimated to be 25, 30 minutes. We've almost doubled that.
Oops.
It's really funny because the last person I interviewed, I was like, let's just stick to 25, 30. And she was like, okay, I'm kind of busy. Like, that's it. And we did the exact same thing.
Yeah, in the last episode, I was talking about me rambling all the time. So I think this is the reason for it, right?
Yeah, well, when you get a couple of like-minded individuals over Skype talking about things
Absolutely.
they love, right? It's I'm sure we could go for much longer.
Yeah, totally.
But you know what? That pretty much wraps it up for the episode. Is there anything you gentlemen would like to say to the audience before we clue up?
Sure thing. I mean, we've talked about Revive to Stage. This is a small show from our Revive Stronger podcast, which you can find over at YouTube, also on iTunes. Every single week on a Saturday, we release a new episode there. Revive to Stage is always a new episode on a Monday. Steve is now 7 weeks out from his show, so I mean, it's really getting serious and also pretty interesting to follow that show. For all else, I mean, we are writing articles, which you can find over on our website, revivestronger.com. And we also have a Facebook group, which is quite active. I think close to 2,000 members right now, which are like all like-minded individuals. We make sure that it's not spammy. We have certain requirements for people who want to get inside the group, but I mean, we are always open to take on some people who are open and willing to learn new stuff. And other than that, Steve, have I forgotten anything?
No, I think you covered it all. Just thank you, Henry, for having us on. Thank you for the audience for listening to us blab. And if you did enjoy it, then you'll probably enjoy the podcast a lot and enjoy following our content, because this sort of stuff, we love talking about it, and we talk about it all day, every day. We're online all the time. So yeah, if you ever want to reach out to us, you can find us online. We'll be happy to have a talk.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you very much. In fact, anybody who's listening or watching, please, at the bottom of the YouTube, I will link all the information the gentleman just required. I'll also put up Steve and Pascal's Instagram, where they have some fantastic infographics, some information there as well, just so you can find them over at Revive Stronger. I'll also link the help group, which is fantastic. You get a lot of like-minded people asking questions all the time, and there are so many people that chime in, try to help with questions, a lot of evidence-based things that really, really, really helped me this year and helped me with a lot of other people. So, gentlemen, once again, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It has been absolute pleasure. Hopefully, we can talk sometime again in the future.
Thanks, Henry.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.